welcome back to my channel. Welcome to day 7 of my 2023 Valentine Card Series. Today I'm going to be making a card using Hello Bluebird's Forest Fawns, and I'll also be using some pattern paper from the Simple Stories Boho Baby collection. This is actually a frame that I die cut using the Gallery Frame 2 on a previous card and kind of swapped out the pieces so it made 2 frames, so I'm going to use that one up today. I'm going to take out a scrap piece of one of those patterns to tuck under my cardstock panel so that I can choose my Copic colors to match. My images are stamped on Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock with Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink. So first I'm going to tackle my 2 fawns, and I went with the E30s for them. I'm using E33, E35, and E37 to start. And I'm trying to match that kind of brown flower that is in that background pattern paper that has kind of like a little bit more of a reddish undertone to it. So I think the E30s work really great for that. In particular, the E35 is a really close match, or between the E35 and E33. But I wanted to darken them up a little bit so that I could have some lighter areas and darker areas on their body. So I'm starting with the E37 and laying in some shadows wherever I think they should go on this first fawn, and carefully coloring around those little spots on the hindquarters. Although you can absolutely color right over them, I'm going to end up coloring over them on the second one. So I'll show you how to fix those later on. But once I laid in my E37, I blended out with the E35, and then I'm coming in with the E33 to fill in most of the rest of the body. And like I said, that gives a really rich shade, these E30s, which go well with that brown flower that's kind of above the deer's head off to the right there. You can kind of see that. So I just got as close as I could get with the brown shades that I own. I did also stop before I went the full way down the belly because I wanted to lighten that up a bit. So I'm going to fill that in with E31. I also left some space on the edge of the hindquarter, but I didn't like the look of that, so I'm going to cover that up in just a minute. I also filled in the rest of the tail, the inner part of the ear, and started to color in the face with the E31, and then finished the ear and the face with the E30. And then I'm going to go in with a second layer of just the E33 to kind of smooth out the blend between that and the E31, and then add a touch more of that E31 as well. I also added more E33 on the tail because I thought that had gotten too light. And then I'm going to come in and do my second deer. I'm going to do the shadows a little bit different because I always like to keep the face as the most highlighted area. So whichever direction they're facing is where the shadows go. This one is a little bit different because she is facing toward her body is facing toward the right, but her head is facing toward the left. So it was just a little bit trickier, but not too bad to kind of just figure out where I wanted to place everything. So I just put the shadows on the back, on the underside of the legs, where the legs are kind of folded over. I did put a shadow on the top of the front leg that's on the far side of the body because the head is kind of leaning out a bit, and we'd maybe be casting that in a shadow, whereas the front leg next to it would be more in direct sunlight, so I left a highlight on the top of that one. And then again, just blending out with the E35 and then the E33. And I will come back in with the E31 for the belly, the face, the ears, a little touch on the tail. Blend that out with the E30, and then come in with a second layer of that E33 to smooth out the blend, and a little bit more of the E31 just on the belly. So then I'm going to move on to their hooves, and I'm just going to use E47 for that. I'm going to color them in solid, and then once I'm done, I'm going to come in with a second layer of that E47 on just the back side of the hoof. And then I'm going to add some rosy cheeks and color in the insides of their ears with R20 and R11. It was still a little bit too dark, so I'm going to pull in the R000 as well to kind of soften that a little bit more into the fur and help it to fade out. And then I also wanted to color in my butterflies with these shades. So starting with the R20 close to the body on the wing, and then I'll blend out with the R11, and then the edges of the wings, which are the most transparent because they would reflect the most light, or most light would kind of come through. That's where I put my highlight with the R000. And then I'm going to move on to my tree, and I wanted to do the trunk in brown again, but not the same browns as I used on the deer. So I decided to go with the E50s because they kind of look like the lighter yellow flower that is in that pattern paper. It's kind of like a really pale, dusty, creamy yellow, and so I thought this was a fairly decent match here. After letting that dry for maybe 30 seconds or so, I did come in with the E55 and just add a few little dashes and swirls to give that wood some texture. And then I'm going to move back over to my butterflies bodies. I'm just going to color that in solid with B45 to match that kind of cornflower blue flower in that background. And then for the grasses and the leaves on the trees, I'm trying to match the two tones of green that are in that pattern paper. There's a darker green leaf, and then there's also a lighter green leaf that I'm not sure that you can see on screen at the moment. It's not as prevalent as the darker green leaf, but there are a few little ones scattered throughout there. It's just more of a brighter green. So I used G20, G94, and G99. I colored them in with the G20 first to just give like a base color, and then I'm using some dots to fill in the rest to give it kind of the appearance of leaves or individual blades of grass once I get down there. So I started with the G94 for the dots, and then I'm darkening them up with the G99. And then I do go back down in the reverse to the G94 and even with the G20 as well. So it kind of just softens up some of them and just gives different layers of, those leaves on that tree. I did decide to do the grass the same. You could just leave it or do it differently, but I decided to do the same dots just to keep it consistent throughout. And once I am done with that, like I said, I'm going to go back and fix those little spots on the deer's hindquarters. So I'm just going to take a white Sakura Jelly Roll pen for that and just color over those little spots. And they turn out really nice and bright white again, so that worked great. And then I'm going to take a black Jelly Roll pen and go over the eyes of my deer. Just getting it started off to the side because mine likes to get a little dried out and crusty in between uses, and that just brightens them up. So I'll trim these images out with their matching dies. For my background, I'm starting with a piece of Bristol Smooth Surface cardstock, and I'm going to watercolor with some Distress Oxide Inks. I'm using Speckled Egg and Stormy Sky, and I'm just pressing those onto an acrylic block so I can use that as a palette and pick it up from there. These two blues really match some of the flowers in that pattern paper, so that's why I chose them. I'm going to put that speckled egg at both the top and the bottom of this panel, and then use the Stormy Sky between them, and then I'll pick up some extra water to help them kind of merge all together. And I'm just going to keep dipping into those inks and adding more here and there until I have a look that I like. I like to have different values, different layers of that paint. So I keep going in and adding a bit more, dabbing the color here and there until I like the way that it is looking. So once I'm happy with it, I'm just going to set this panel aside to dry. And in the meantime, I'm going to work on my sentiment. So I have a piece of Lawn Fawn Moonstone cardstock, and I want to do kind of like an ombre effect on the die cut letters. So I used B45 marker first at the bottom, and then I'm blending that out with the B41. The B41 kind of pushed away the B45, so I'm going to go in and add a bit more of that and then blend it out one more time with the B41. And then I'll just grab my colorless blender to go over the top edge to help that kind of fade out into the plain cardstock again. And it looks kind of funny now, but once it dries, it'll make more sense. Then I'm going to take one of the dies from the Hello Bluebird gallery frame number 6, and it has the word love. So I'm going to place that where I want it over that inked section, tape it down into place, and run that through my die cutting machine, and then I can pop that out. It does die cut in 2 pieces, so the L is separate and then the rest of the word is in one long line. And then I have popped that background into my MISTI so that I can stamp the rest of the sentiment. Initially I was going to mask off the word love, but I felt like that was going to leave me with too much empty space in the lower section of the die cut windows, which you'll see in a minute. So I ended up stamping out the whole thing. And then on the inside of the card, I'm going to stamp the other fawn and the sentiment, so very fond of you. And I also did the other butterfly, and that is using bubblegum ink from Lawn Fawn on some ballet slippers cardstock that I've scored and folded to a standard A2 size card. So I have added some foam tape to the back of that gallery frame number 2 so I can pop it up and give it a bit of dimension. So I'll just peel off those release papers, and then I'm going to line it up over that background panel, just making sure that I have that stamped sentiment straight in the top right of that bottom section. And then I'm going to take some glue, just using my Barely Art Precision Craft Glue, and add that to the back of this panel so I can adhere it to my card front. And I'm just making sure I have about the same amount of that pink cardstock showing through on all 4 sides, and then pressing that down into place. And then I can bring in my images, and I went back and forth about popping these up on foam tape or just adhering them flat to the card. I ended up deciding to just use the liquid glue so that the frame would be the most dimensional, and then you're kind of like looking through the frame at this little scene, if that makes sense. So I added the tree over to the right hand side, and then I'm adding that other little strip of grass over on the left, just making sure it's on there straight. And then I'll take my standing deer and put that over on the grass on the left hand side. And I wanted to have the deer that is lying down kind of beneath the tree, so it's going to overlap the other deer just a little bit, which is why I wanted to adhere that standing one first. So I'm just making sure that this one looks right. I kind of moved him up slightly so you could see a little bit of the grass poking through under his legs. And then I'm going to take the butterfly that is on the side view, and I'm going to add that so that it is sitting on the lying deer's tail. And then the other butterfly I'm going to add to the space between the tree and the standing deer. So now I'm ready to bring in the rest of my sentiment. I'm going to use my EK Success reverse tweezers to hang on to these letters since they are such a delicate die cut. And then I added my Barely Art Precision Craft Glue on the back. I did dab a little bit off just so there wouldn't be too much excess. Started with the L so I could make sure that there was about the same amount of space between the edge of the L and the edge of the inner part of that frame as there are in the Y in Dearly on the edge in the frame. And then I'm just adding the word love underneath that. So you see what I mean? If I would have masked off the word love, there would have been a big empty space there. So It does repeat the word love, but I don't think that's an issue. There still was too much of a space though on the right hand side below the stamped sentiment, so I did decide to color and die cut an extra butterfly and adhered that over there. I think that helped. And then I wanted to add a little bit of glitter, so I'm doing that on the butterfly's wings and just making them a little bit sparkly. I just covered them completely for this particular card. And then I wanted the sparkle in one other place, so I decided to run it along the bottom portion of each of the letters in the die cut word love. So just being really careful to only add it on top of that die cut. And if it got a little bit off to the side, I just used my fingernail to scrape that away. So now you can see how that stickles catches the light and a little bit closer detail of the card. And then there is another peek at the inside as well. I really hope you guys enjoyed this one. I think these deer are just so darling. So if you did, please be sure to hit that like button. It really helps with the YouTube algorithm. Make sure you're subscribed and have your notification bell rung so that you're alerted whenever I post a new video, which is every Monday and Friday. All of the products I use will be listed and linked for you in the description bar below. And if you'd like to keep watching, here's day 7 of the previous 2 years of Valentine Card Series. You can click on either one to check them out. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have an amazing day. I'll see you soon with another video. Bye-bye.